want to talk about something called defensive layering, or building your defensive options against the chip as Happy Chaos. The way that I built my defense against him is by layering defensive options. Essentially, you want to pick options that are not super risky compared to the way that your opponent's playing and the amount of health that you have, and factors that go into the RPS of the situation, right? Like, first we have to break down our options. So we have blocking, we have backdashing, we have throwing, and we have mashing, right? Those are our 4 core components of our defense. Typically you're going to be blocking, right? Unless you're looking for a specific thing to do. And you want to look at the risk versus reward. So let's take a look at some of the moves that a typical Geo player will do, right? So we're going to use our recording option. If you were here in the last video, you can check that out. And see how we set up the bot. On recording option 1, we're going to do a knockdown into close slash, right? Recording option 2, we're going to do a knockdown into throw. Oh, oof. There we go. And then on run up 3, we're going to bait a DP. We're just going to run up block, right? So it's not very hard to tell which options here might beat the others, right? If you're Soul, you're sitting over here, and we're going to set it to recording 1. So on recording 1 was the strike, so we're going to take the hit, and then we're just going to block, right? That's a pretty easy solution. We can also backdash the meaty, right? That's a pretty decent one as well. But the things that we can't do to that are try and throw it, or else we'll get counter hit. If I can actually mash it fast enough, there we go. And we can't press our own button, or else we get hit as well. On a throw, we can backdash, and we can press buttons. If I can press it fast enough, hello. And then we can tech the throw, right? We can also jump out. But blocking loses. Pretty simple, pretty simple. And then finally, if they are run up blocking, right? Us blocking doesn't do anything. Us jumping doesn't do very much either. If we try to mash, then you know, you get the obvious block, and then they can counter hit us. And then if we throw them, that wins. So looking at our defensive options here, we can see which ones are kind of risky, right? It's pretty easy to tell that throwing is super risky, right? Especially without meter to PRC it like so. Then mashing is also kind of risky, right? And so is backdashing. If you have a really good move like Soul's 5k, mashing becomes a little less risky. You get to weigh your risk reward a little bit. To examine the situation, you have to understand, what am I mashing with, right? Or what am I trying to do on Wake Up? And what do I get as a reward? A Soul 5k as a reward for, you know, getting a baited block, for example, you don't get much reward, but at least you get to take your turn back, maybe get a frame trap or something. That's pretty decent. If you do hit them pressing a button, then you also get a pretty okay reward. Let's see how much damage. It should be about, I don't know, like 100. Yeah, oh wow. Exactly. So about 100 damage, right? That's good, and you get Oki, and you get to start your turn again. But the risk is that you get counter hit, right? So you get counter hit into a big old combo, wall break. Is that even Soul at this point? I know, right? Getting a reward that small, dude, I need to get like at least 200 damage. If you're looking at the risk versus reward, right? Like getting counter hit by a close slash is a pretty big deal. So the least risky thing we can do is just block and take the throw, right? Throws don't do that much damage. You know, they're pretty decent, but they're not crazy in this game, right? Compared to a combo counter hit close slash, which can, you know, take upwards of 300 health with a rapid cancel, right? Like, you don't want to eat those. So it might be tempting to just sit here and block. And if that's the kind of person you are, then one tip is to use FD a bit more. We'll switch it to our strike recording and watch how much pushback you get off of one FD move. That's pretty decent. If you FD more moves than that, it gets even better. So we can set our recording to do close slash 2S, which is a pretty common thing, right? If we FD both those moves, look, 2S doesn't even reach. And then you get a whiff punish. So it's a really strong thing, except you sometimes take the throw. So trying to develop a strategy right against this option, strike is really strong in this game, so you tend to block it and just take the throw, but you can't take a lot of throws, right? So how do you deal with this? Well, we use something called a fuzzy strategy. So what you can do is hold block at first and then do something else. Typically players in anime games will do a thing called a fuzzy jump. And a fuzzy jump is like this. So let's go to our recording number 2 where they throw us. And if I do it correctly, you get block and then jump, and you jump out, right? And so in this game you have 5 frames of throw protection, so that initial block that you do for a frame doesn't get you thrown, unlike other games where you might not have that throw protection. So this lets us do some things that are very interesting. So one thing that you can do when you jump is you get that counter punish, right? Well, it turns out that if you try to do this against certain options, you might get hit with a low, you might get knocked down again and put back in the situation. So what you can do is, instead, you can do this thing called an IBFD backdash. So the way that this looks, if I can do it right on the first try, I can't, because it's hard. There we go. You see how I flashed with FD for 1 second there and then I backdashed? So I FD'd at first, which pushes them away if they do attack me, and then I backdashed to dodge their throw. So if they strike, then it gets blocked and they FD, and my backdash doesn't come out. And then if they do throw, my backdash comes out and I dodge the throw. This is a option select or a fuzzy, so this is a fuzzy backdash. So just like fuzzy jump, it dodges the throw. You can also do a fuzzy mash, which is blocking and then pressing a button, although that kind of loses, right? Because it takes time for your move to come out. So unless you're doing it with a move like 5K that's only 3 frames, it's hard to actually do it and still block, right? It's almost physically impossible. And then lastly is the fuzzy throw tech. So you block and then you throw, right? Pretty simple, it techs throws. And against certain characters, this can actually be very strong. Against certain characters, you can actually destroy their entire offensive game plan by doing this. Geo is a great example because their entire game revolves around doing strike throw mix-up. So when you FD and then backdash, right? Or if you FD and then jump, or if you do whatever you need to do to get out of that throw strike mix-up, they actually have to coordinate an entire game plan around trying to deal with that. So you might ask, what do they do against that, right? So they could do something like a delayed move instead to catch your OS, right? So if you're doing like fuzzy backdash, what they could do is like do this and then do this, right? Do like a little bit of a delayed move. And then if I backdash, I get hit, right? Or if I jump, I get hit. Same thing. So it requires your opponent to have a little bit of prerequisite knowledge. But the strong part about creating a layered offense is that it's impossible to defeat without knowing how. So when you incorporate these strategies, people will have to develop a counter strategy or know one beforehand. This is typically what's referred to as like a layer like 0 or a layer 1, layer 2, right? Just waking up and blocking is like a layer 0 thing. Like waking up and pressing a button is layer 0. But layer 1 is developing this offensive strategy or defensive strategy where I do something like an option select. And that requires the opponent to adapt. Because they've adapted, I can return to layer 0. And now that they're doing some delay move, I can mash on wake up again. You create a layered defense that's really hard to beat if you vary the way that you're waking up every time. So by doing this, you've guided your opponent playing a certain way, and because they're playing that certain way, you get to defeat it. It's particularly strong against strike throw characters without command throws because they don't have a way to beat your throw tech, right? Unless they shimmy and bait it, which opens them up once again to wake up mashing. So you have to play a certain way in order to get past layer 0 and then return to it once you realize that they're trying to adapt to you. An example of that chip, right? Like he kept waking up with 2K2D. Like he woke up with 2K2D all the time. And granted, I don't know exactly if they were OSing or not, but I'm pretty sure they weren't because a lot of the times they got hit on wake up, right? So, but if they were doing an option select, they could block and then 2k 2d. And if I was actually delaying my wake up attack, then I would hit them, right? It didn't work there because close slash was faster than my 2k. But, you know, mileage varies. Once you've created this layered defense, you get to dictate the way your opponent has to play around it. And then once they've adapted, you get to change it up and then make them adapt again. And this adaptation mini game that you play with your opponent is integral to trying to defeat them in not only tournament sets, but especially like longer sets. Like if you play long games with people, your friends, like being able to do more than just one thing is very important. And being able to do more than one thing in a tournament setting could mean the difference between winning and losing. For example, if I go into a tournament and a Geo only knows how to run up throw or run up strike, then they'll always lose to this. There's nothing they can do, right? Unless they mess up and get a delayed attack by accident. That's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. Talking about layering your defense to try and create a strategy that beats your opponent, trying to bolster your defense in a way that, you know, can prevent your opponent from just easily opening you up with very simple strategies. I'll post this on YouTube probably either tomorrow or the next night, depending on when I get around to editing, because that shit takes forever. And then you can catch it on my YouTube channel. Like and subscribe if you like the video, if you're watching this from YouTube. I appreciate you watching / hanging out with me on the stream to check it out. I'm gonna figure out somebody to raid real quick.